Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
I'm doing pretty good, Yariv. Obviously, beginning of the week. For the Flyers, they haven't been doing so hot as of late, just
No.
with their record and 5-on-5 play mainly, and that's what we're going to really dissect and get into. But how have you been doing, Yariv?
Yeah, I've been doing all right, man. Definitely the Flyers have been bumming me out to some degree. Not as much as Twitter, would make you perceive. But it hasn't been exciting, not as exciting as the offseason. But we talked about it, right? The offseason and preseason, it has so much promise. And then the reality of things kind of set in a little bit. And that's kind of where we're at right now. But not all bad things to say about the team. We do have some good stuff to talk about. So that's the good things. There is a silver lining, I guess, to some of the suffering. And, one thing I do want to remind everybody, there is insurance. I've said this over and over again. We've said this. There's insurance built into this season that even if the team severely underperforms and, ends up at the bottom three of the league, worst case scenario, which I don't think will happen. But even if that is the case, the Flyers do have 6 picks inside of the top 50 as of right now. So, yeah, no matter what,
Yeah.
we are not set up here for utter failure.
And one thing to add too, right?
Yeah.
Like even if, for example, they do finish kind of near the bottom of the standings, or near the bottom of the league, at least you have 1 year where, let's say, the pressure isn't entirely on yet, to kind of acclimate Matvei Michkov to the NHL level. Because
Yeah.
let's say, it does end up being kind of a lost year and they don't really get to be competitive or close to the playoff race. You can really try to get him prepped for the following years, and that might make him even better down the line. So that's also a positive, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, we're going to talk about it. So, we got a lot to talk about. We'll talk about some Flyers news. Some of it has already happened, but obviously we're recording after the fact. We're going to bring it up anyway. We're going to talk about Michkov. We're going to talk about Vasili found some good stats online that we're going to pepper in there as well. We're going to talk about the disconnectedness of the team, and it is something that we brought up last season quite a bit of when the Flyers played at their worst. We're seeing those patterns right now, pretty much the majority. And I really like what Tortorella said. I actually liked his press conference after the game. I thought he did a great job of just being open about the current situation. Talk about line combinations a little bit. We'll talk about the D core. We'll talk about Travis Sanheim. There's a silver lining to this. We'll talk about the Phantoms and kind of their current situation, which seems to be just history repeating more and more. And then we're going to do the quick prospect updates at the end with some potential trade rumors around Luchenko. We'll talk a little bit about that and just some performances. And that'll probably be it, unless we pepper some other stuff within there. So before we get started, just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe. Wow, what did I do here? Sorry.
Good.
Yeah. So everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. Get notified on when these episodes come out. We're recording a lot more on Monday right now. That might continue a little bit, but during the season, a lot of times it's Monday or Wednesday. But usually Monday through Wednesday is the days we record. If we have to record on a Thursday, we hit it there. That's what helps to have the notification bell, just to let you know. Also, follow us on Spotify and iTunes for the audio version. Did get a couple more reviews coming in on the audio versions. Please keep that up. That's awesome. Follow us there. Give us reviews. Again, liking and subscribing, giving us reviews. All of that is the best way to support this show. So if you're listening to it, especially if you're a regular listener and you haven't reviewed or liked or subscribed to our content, we hope you do like it, but please support us in that way. And also shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go and get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. It is cold out, or at least it's getting colder out, and now is really the best time to eat a cheesesteak. And my roommate was eating a cheesesteak last night, and it looked phenomenal. It wasn't from Jim's, unfortunately, traitor. But God, cheesesteaks are amazing. So make sure to go get one of the best. Jim's has a fantastic cheesesteak. Also, check out Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Make sure to go to them for all your insurance adjustments needs. They will help you with your facilitation process between yourself and the insurance company. They'll help you with the paperwork, the adjustments, all of the headaches that come with dealing with insurance companies. Summit Public Adjusters will help you. Again, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partners, Sports Spider. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, sportspider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite team. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out Sports Spider. Again, the link is in the description. Make sure to check out Sports Spider. They are our partners and we appreciate them. And our stuff is pinned at the top. So every time we release an article, a podcast, a video of some sort, it is pinned at the top. So we are grateful for them being our partners. So make sure to check them out and support them. All right. Let's get into Flyers news. So the first one is, and we already are well aware of this because the Flyers have already played a game without him. Cam York has been announced, has been given a timeline of a minimum of 2 weeks with some sort of upper body injury. We don't know, like modern NHL today, we don't really know the full extent of the injury or exactly what it is. You know, we can speculate, but that won't really do much. But we do know he's going to be out a minimum of 2 weeks, so he'll miss a handful of games. The Flyers obviously will have to adjust. We saw some of that adjustment. He missed 2 games. I said 1, but he missed 2 games. One game went relatively well without him in the lineup. The other one, not as strong. Obviously, he's going to be very noticeable not in the lineup. But, you know, there is a silver lining to it. You know, the pairings weren't getting changed at all. And the team wasn't necessarily doing amazing. And with him being arguably the Flyers' best defender, though I'd still give that to Sanheim. It looks like he's still kind of continuing that trend, but York is definitely, it's between him and York. So huge loss to the team, but it does allow now the Flyers to experiment a little bit more. And then conversations come up of, you know, if they do find another solution, you know, what's going to be the situation with York? Hopefully it's a maximum of 2 weeks and it doesn't extend beyond 2 weeks. We'll know more as we move forward, and depending on when we see him skating and hitting the ice, I'm sure we'll get some kind of update in a couple weeks. So hopefully it's not long term. We have seen that type of stuff before, especially when they're vague about the injuries. But as of right now, 2 weeks. What do you think?
For the Flyers' sake, I think the best case scenario is this to be maybe 2 weeks, potentially even less, right? Yeah. Obviously, I don't think they're going to try to rush him because they want to be precautious. They want to, you know, they don't want a chance of re-injury here. I don't know. I mean, York was playing close to the Flyers' best defenseman, in my opinion. Yeah. Sanheim was looking pretty good as well. They're pretty much on an even playing field. Like every which night, maybe one night it might be Sanheim, one night it might be York. But one thing that can't be denied is Tortorella was giving York heavy minutes, right? So somebody's got to replace those minutes. Somebody's got to replace those hard shifts facing off against top lines. Right now, it seems to be Sanheim and Ristolainen taking the brunt of that, but if it does extend a little bit longer, they might have to kind of filter that ice time through the rest of the lineup just to ensure they don't, burn out Sanheim, burn out Ristolainen, right? Because it still is very early in the season. And I do know in that Minnesota game, I believe Sanheim and Risto were close to upwards of, I think Sanheim 27 minutes, Risto about 25 or something like that.
He was just under 28 minutes, actually. I think it was like 27:50 or something.
Yeah, so it just shows like, you can get away with doing that in certain games, but if you're going to be giving your defensemen, especially your top pairing, playing against those top lines, that type of usage every single night, you're going to wear them down, right? So they're going to have to pick and choose on that front. Obviously, for York, I think you just have to hope it isn't a concussion because he's had some concussion issues in the past before he's made it to the NHL level. So I think for the Flyers, that would probably be their hope. If it is, I do hope they're very precautious. So if it does have to be more than 2 weeks at that point, if it's concussion related, we obviously don't know. But if that is the case, then they should just take as much time as they need to, because it's not just about this season, it's about the future for York, right? He's still a very young defenseman, and concussions are no joke. So you don't want to
Yeah.
want to take a chance and rush somebody back and then potentially even further the injury. What I will say though is the Flyers are going to have to figure it out defensively without him, because right now, in terms of goals against in the NHL, they've allowed 40 goals against, and that is second last in the NHL. Only Pittsburgh has allowed more goals with 42. So they're gonna need to figure it out with the defense. I mean, the goaltending obviously, in a sense, has had a little bit to do with that in certain games, but it's gonna be tough without York. But I do think Sanheim Ristolainen is a good replacement as a first pair. We've kind of seen those two have chemistry in the past, at least.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll go more in depth on the D in the second half of the show, and we'll talk about that more in depth. And obviously, you have more statistics and all that to pepper in throughout here, but it's a big loss. It's a big loss for this team. They're not deep from the top four department. The only other real true top four defender they have, at least that has played that role for our team, is Drysdale, and he's 22 years old, and he's not necessarily ready for that role either. So, it's gonna take some time. But York didn't start off amazing either in the year that he became one of the best defensemen on this team. So it's going to be interesting.
There's time
to
to progress, right? There's
Right,
always
this
an
is the
ability
silver.
to get better. So.
Well, this is a silver lining, is that like we will at least get to test in a rebuilding year. A lot of people are still in denial the Flyers are rebuilding, but when you're the third youngest team in the league, you make no offseason moves to improve your team outside of bringing in a 19-year-old.
Yeah, it's a clear plan, right?
Yeah, it's clearly a rebuild. So this is at least the time where it's not as painful to lose York. Like, for instance, if we were a cup contender and York was, evolved and we were competing in games every day, one, you should be good enough to withstand that. And I do want to talk about that when we get later, but, it's not as, there's not as much lost here. It's like the Flyers don't make the playoffs. It's not the end of the world.
Just to end, I would also say, at least for the situation the Flyers are in, right? Probably losing York is not great because they're in a bit of a tailspin. So you want to have your best lineup to potentially get out of it. But most teams, if you're going to lose one of your top players, they'd rather have it be at the beginning of the year versus later on when it kind of gets closer and into the playoffs and potentially the pace picks up. You want to have your best players. So if it is only 2 weeks, I think the best time for it to happen is probably now, despite their, troubles and a little bit of losses here. So
yeah, absolutely. The other piece of news, and this one we pretty much told you was going to happen. We were both surprised he was even being used in this capacity, and the Flyers moved forward with him making the team. Though we did see value in it, we were both nervous about a 9-game trial for Jet Luchenko. We wanted to see him with his team, but Jet Luchenko has officially been sent back to Guelph. He sat out a couple games in a row. He played 4 games of a total, I think, possible 7. I think it was. Maybe it was possible 8. No, it was 7. So yeah, he was sent back pretty quickly before the Flyers went and played the Canadians. Not really that surprising. Again, we talked about it here. We pretty much said next time we'll talk to you, Jet Luchenko won't be on this team. So to us, I think it was pretty obvious by his usage. I'm glad that the leadership kind of stepped in, and I think Tortorella was not fighting it very hard, to be honest, especially with the current situation and, in the times where the team was spiraling, he didn't lean on Luchenko, which is usually a sign, nor should he have because he just turned 18. But Luchenko does go back to Guelph. I will say, he did play in his first game, and
not a good one.
I forget the name of the team that they were playing against. I'd have to look it up, but they lost 10-1 in their first game. They were down 9-0 heading into the third period. Luchenko was a -1, I think, in the end, which is actually not too bad. Maybe he actually finished -3. I don't remember exactly, but he did have an assist on his team's only goal. So obviously Guelph not a great team, maybe even taking a step backwards when you look at a score like that. That's an insane amount of goals to give up. So, but the good news is that, and we'll talk about more about him at the end. But the good
Yeah, the
news is he is
Brampton
playing.
Steelheads, Yariv.
Yeah,
That's
that's it.
my hometown's Brampton, so it
There you
used to be
go.
the Battalion.
Yeah.
They moved to North Bay, and then now Brampton's back as the Steelheads. So
Okay.
very
Well,
fun.
yeah. So Luchenko has been sent back, and yeah, it's gonna be fun to follow him, and I expect his production. I'm just happy he's playing big minutes again, even if it's on a bad team. He wasn't on a great team before, last season either. But we just need him playing and playing as much as possible. Quite frankly.
Exactly. I think that was my whole thing with this, with the 9 game trial is if he is going to stay, he needs to be a real contributor. He needs to be playing every night. He needs to be playing in multiple situations. Like, I just think for his age, it doesn't behoove the Flyers to keep him here and play him, in a limited role, in a bottom six role. Is that really going to help his development at this point? Maybe if the team was more of a contender, let's say, and there was not to say all positive things happening to the team, but I just also think with the, potential that this ends up spiraling out of control, let's say, it's probably better to not have him around for something like that, right? Like, you don't
Right.
want an 18-year-old around a team that could maybe finish bottom 10 in the league. I mean, from a development standpoint, maybe, because let's say you're out of it, then you want to play him more. But I think just being around all that losing and all that potential negativity, I don't think that does really any good for anybody. And I think the main thing for Luchenko is the NHL is a very fast-paced league. He's fast in the sense that he can keep up with the skating, but I just think that his offensive skills, puck handling, passing might not be on the same level as some other NHL players currently. So having him try to work on those skills at the NHL pace, at the NHL level, is that the best thing for his development, the best way to progress his offense. I think with Guelph, obviously, even though they're not a great team, they're losing 10-1, like they can't be good. So he might not have the best talent to play with or anything like that, but he will have more time and space to make plays there versus at the NHL level. And that's where you can kind of try to work on certain skills, hone certain skills. And no matter what anybody says, oh, well, isn't it best to learn at the NHL level where it's the most fast pace? I would argue against that, because let's say you're trying to, work on certain things and you're just not getting it, or it's not working at that level. How discouraging is that going to be for you, right? Whereas at the OHL level, maybe you try something that doesn't work one game and then you try it the other game and say, hey, I need to do it this certain way, and this way it'll pay off for me. So I just think there's more of a chance for that, and for him to do that. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Yariv.
No. I just wanted to add to what you were saying because I thought that was a great point. And also, there's never going to be a point where Luchenko is going to play less than 18 minutes a night for Guelph,
Exactly.
right? He's going to be playing probably on average 20 minutes a night.
All situations as well. And that
Right.
helps you get better in different in-game situations and managing certain situations. And that's, something that Tortorella as a coach obviously looks for. How many times has he mentioned that, players need to learn how to play in certain situations and certain aspects of the game? If he's never seen the ice for the Flyers in those situations or those aspects, how is he really going to learn, right? So
Yeah.
I do think, realistically, I think the AHL would have been the best place for him probably. But
I agree.
unfortunately, with the CHL NHL transfer agreement, that's not the case. Though there is some news and some rumors that agreement might be changing.
It would
Possibly,
change to 19, which would
yeah,
be
exactly.
next year, maybe.
Yeah. But
He'd be
I'm
in
just
the NHL.
saying, not even for him specifically. I'm just saying
Right.
for prospects in general,
Sure.
to be able to send a
Like
19-year-old
Bonk.
to the AHL would be probably more beneficial, right?
Yeah.
For so many teams at the NHL level. And the last thing on Luchenko, I just wanted to mention Torts's comments. He's essentially said, with Jet in the mess we're in right now at the start of the year, I'm not looking for an 18-year-old to try to get us out of it. It's still a state of flux with him as far as what we do. So when I'm in that situation, we kind of turn to the team is really struggling right now, and with some more veteran guys, it's hard to throw him in there now and trying to help us out of that mess. So yeah, so it makes sense that they sent them back, basically, right? Like Tortorella essentially said that they don't really want to have Luchenko around the Flyers when they're struggling in this manner. And I agree with that sentiment. I think it's probably not a great thing for his development, firstly, to be in a situation where you might be around, let's say, a team that's struggling so much, so heavily as your first taste of the NHL. And also, too, I just think with Luchenko, like I said before, like if he's not playing, which he wasn't playing, you can't justify keeping him up, right?
Yeah. No, I think I'll be honest with you, dude. Just listening to Briere and the way, I don't think they were ever planning on keeping him past the 9 games. The fact that
I
they
agree.
didn't,
Yeah,
the fact that Briere said that he thought Luchenko actually earned the game against Calgary and they benched him anyway because they were worried about him getting injured because a lot of 18, look at Macklin Celebrini, the only other
yeah,
18-year-old in the league right now is injured after his first game. And he's a top tier young player.
exactly.
Right? He's got the offensive game already ready for the NHL. Like maybe Luchenko has potentially even a better defensive game, but the offensive game, without a doubt, it goes to Celebrini. And he got injured within a game, which honestly, it is a testament to Luchenko. He didn't even look like he was close to getting injured, but the fact that they were that hesitant with him to begin with showed that it was always in Briere's mind that he was going to send him back. That in his mind, it was going to be a max of 9 games, probably less, right? And they're like, all right, let's do this now. He's just sitting. Let's get him playing. Let's send him home. And I imagine they kind of had that conversation with him anyway. And Briere talked about what you referenced, right? He said what we both referenced. Like, we want him shooting. We want him to work on his game. Like, you don't have a guaranteed spot on the roster next year, which, again, I think is the smart thing to say to him. Not because he probably won't be on this team, because he probably will be on this team. Probably not. I don't think he's ever going to play in the AHL, to be honest with you. But it's set the expectation where, like, you loved what he did in the offseason. And I think he is the type of guy who's going to ramp it up for even what he did before. Like, bring that same energy again when you're actually ready, you know? So, like, you don't want him to get comfortable thinking you can kind of walk through your season in the OHL and then, you'll be on the Flyers next year. It's more of like, well, next time's, second try is a charm, right? It's like that's kind of the attitude they have to him. It's like, you're going to get another shot to make the team next year, not you will be on this team next year. And it just shows that Briere is definitely more aligned with what we've been saying, and why we were so hesitant. And the fact that I think they even gave him the 4 games shows how good of a prospect he really is.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
how
I do
evolved he
think
is.
I do think a lot of people underestimated the pick in the sense. Like if you look at the reaction when he was picked versus the reaction to him to start the season and when he made the team, it's completely
The
flipped
narrative has
around, right?
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think a lot of people didn't really have a viewpoint into really his skill set or what kind of player he was, and that's just the case with it sometimes with young players in the draft and prospects. I will say this, and we can kind of move on. For any prospect, I think it's always better to probably not rush them. I think we've seen so many prospects over the years be rushed, and then there's really no way for them to kind of regain their confidence, regain their game, and really
Mm-hmm.
progress as a player. I think it's way better to just be cautious, even if, let's say, the OHL might not be the best place for him to progress and get better, and maybe there isn't so much for him to learn. I do think one thing is clear. You can't ruin a prospect at the OHL level
Right.
for them staying an extra year, but you
That's
can ruin them at the NHL level if they're here too early.
that's
So,
the old Hextall mantra, right? I've
yeah.
never seen a player get ruined by spending too much time, in the minors or in juniors. And you look at a guy like Alexander Ovechkin, who was playing against men, so it's not a great comparison. But when he did come to the NHL, which was a more difficult league, he was a little bit older, right? I think he was 20 or 21. I think he was
Yeah.
20, and he came over and he just hit the ground running. And again, that's a generational talent. But he probably wouldn't have scored 50 goals if he came in at 18, right? He probably would have
And
been like
100 points, exactly.
right. He probably would have put up like 30, like 65, 80 points or whatever, put up 35 goals, right? But when he came in, he was undoubtedly ready. And that's how we want to feel about Luchenko. Like, I expect to see him at training camp next year to be like, that's what I would like. Now
ready
you're
now.
ready. Right.
Exactly.
Like, now, like, you've scored. He didn't score a goal like in preseason or any of that. Like, the fact he made the team with all that was surprising. Okay, the next piece of news, and this has already taken place, so you're well aware of it. But Alexei Kolosov and Emil Andre were recalled to the Flyers. They both played in the game against Montreal. We can take a little bit of time here to talk about it. With Kolosov, let's start with Kolosov because that's the more interesting of the two. I wouldn't say it's that surprising. Look, the reality
Fedotov
is,
didn't play well.
right. Not only did he not play well, he hasn't really played well in any of the games he's been in. He was okay in preseason, just okay, but no better than Kolosov in the one game that we saw Kolosov in. And the reality is, he played poorly in all of the. He had some highlights in those games, but he was below average in all three games that he started. So when I see that, I think back to Peterson, I think back to Sandstrom, and I think back to Tortorella's tolerance for really bad goaltending, and it's not there. So as soon as the Flyers had an opportunity and they know they have this situation with Kolosov, we know it's still a little tentative on how long he stays here, and I think giving him NHL games in their mind, one, he was the only goalie playing at the AHL level. They were just hitting him with games, so they wanted him to be ready for the NHL, try to give him as much experience as possible, and then they called him up. So it was kind of anticipated. The cool thing is, first time a Belarusian player, that a Belarusian player play for Belarus has played in the NHL. That is very cool. And I'll say this, we could talk about his game a little bit too. While he did not have, I wouldn't say he had a fantastic game or even a great game, because it's hard to say that when you give up 4 goals. He did give up, I think, 1 weak goal, right? The goal against Caulfield, I think, was savable.
But also that goes through him, but on a power play can be tough too.
Right.
And a very weird bounce. Like, there's a super weird bounce before the puck even gets to Caulfield. It's like in the air. You usually don't see a chance develop that way.
My first thought when I saw it wasn't that, God damn it, Kolosov. It's not the way I felt about the Fedotov goals, right? Yeah. So I agree with you. But he had some really nice saves. He looks just like we saw him in preseason. He's very quick. He's a little bit undersized, but his mobility is fantastic in net. He looks sharp. He didn't look intimidated or out of place. He was not a sore spot or a weakness for the team yesterday. And quite frankly, I would not be surprised if the next opportunity that you think that Fedotov would have been given, it goes to Kolosov again. I think the Flyers, with the injury to York, it's kind of obvious they have the extra roster spot right now because York is on IR, so they're going to roll with 3 goalies. But I think if Kolosov continues to look the way he did in net, I think we might find Fedotov in the minors. And I don't know if the Flyers would be so upset to upset him, because if he wants to bail out of that contract, I don't think they'll necessarily be sad about it. And nobody's going to take him. But again, if he's playing that way, it might actually be best for Fedotov to play in the minors and at least get his game going at the NHL, in the American level, right? Like the American game. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Kolosov? You're the goalie. You probably have the better analysis.
It's an interesting situation. For Fedotov, I think the writing was on the wall, right? He had a lot of chances. There were some situations where it was really strange for me with him, because some situations he let in goals 5-hole and right through him, then you make huge robs on certain saves, and you're kind of just like wondering, how is this happening? It's puzzling, but I think a lot of that is just his size, to be honest. He's so big. You're bound to save something. You're bound to make a save. I think that has a lot to do with it. But like you said, John Tortorella is not really a fan of mediocre goaltending. That's what Fedotov was giving them, to be honest, probably a lot worse than mediocre. So they're going to try another option because they have Alexei Kolosov here. And there is, a situation where he might potentially want to go back to the KHL if he does not get NHL time, as it's been rumored, right? So I think where the Flyers are at, why not give him these starts? Because first of all, you keep him happy, you keep him here. He remains to be an option for you, whether that's at the NHL or the AHL level. And then to add on to that, with Kolosov, if you just look at his performance, it's a lot better than what Fedotov has essentially been doing. And it's only his first game. And that's what you have to really kind of think about as a silver lining, because he looked pretty decent. I would just look at his overall technique. Like personally, the first period, I think that was probably his worst. As he got into the game, he settled into his net a little bit more, and he looked a little bit more kind of compact and not as shaky. I think in the first, there was some rebounds he needed to kind of control. But then after that, he looked pretty good. He made a couple of big saves to keep the Flyers in it. In the second, I mean, it was 1-1 for a while there, and he was, making a lot of big saves to really keep the Flyers around in that game. And then even some of the goals he did give up, like 2 deflection goals, it's pretty tough for a goalie. As you said, I think the Caulfield goal is probably the one you'd want to see him make a save just because it goes through him. But it is his first NHL game. You have to understand there's going to be nerves. So I think it's a positive, right? Just to see that Kolosov looks better than Fedotov and maybe is probably going to be a better option than him moving forward. Obviously, like, we have to see what happens. I think if he goes in his next game and has a complete meltdown or a stinker, maybe they give it to Fedotov again.
Sure.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, too, if something they might try, especially if York stays out long term, is on back-to-backs. Maybe they'll give Urson like a complete night off and just have the 2 Russians kind of be the starter and the backup. We've seen them do that before, so that could be a benefit for Urson. But for Kolosov, the main thing with his game is just the speed laterally, right? He's very quick on his pads, very good down low. So in terms of where Fedotov, you saw him struggling making those lateral saves. That is not a struggle of Kolosov's game. That's probably the biggest strength to his game. And in terms of the NHL level and just how teams are trying to open goalies up, usually it is east to west, especially on the power play. So that probably is a good thing, right? To have a goalie in there like that can move that quickly laterally. He might be able to bail you out on certain breakdowns. That maybe Fedotov might have not been able to in terms of certain saves. So I think Kolosov played well, but we'll have to just see where it goes from here. It's not like he had an amazing game or anything, but it was a solid first start in the NHL, especially with the way the Flyers played in front of him. They didn't give him a lot of support defensively either. So
yeah, it was a weird game, and we're gonna talk about that. But I agree. I thought Kolosov really dynamic looking goalie, and his ability to move from post to post, I think, is really strong. And I love how flexible, and he seems like he's a goalie that will have some dramatic saves. Like,
yes,
visually will be, look like over the top. He stopped a 2-on-0. He almost stopped like a couple crazy ones where you kind of slid across. I think he had the 2-on-0 split where he forced them to hit the post.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know if they actually hit the post in the end, I remember it was post, right?
But yeah, it was post. But essentially, even if they were on net, he would have saved it. But the way that he covered the net with this split is kind of what forced that to happen.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's exciting. I mean, to be honest with you, he kind of reminds me, and this is not a great comparison or fair to him, but he reminded me a little bit of Bobrovsky when we first saw Bob here, just like that really.
Jonathan Quick, I would say.
Yeah. Too. Oh, that's a better one. Yeah.
Because the size thing, because they're both smaller, and then just the speed. Like, Quick was small, but he would make up for the lack of size with his speed. And that's kind of the same thing and the same, thing that prospect analysts would bring up about Kolosov in his game is that, even though he does lack a little bit of size, the speed makes up for it because he's so quick. I think the one thing he'll just need to be wary of is, with the size and the speed, not to get taken advantage of, like, up top, right over the shoulders. Yeah. So we'll need to see kind of how he adjusts as maybe the league learns his style a little bit. But
sure,
I do think he might be a little more equipped right now at the NHL level versus Fedotov, who looks a tad slow. And I do think, like, it's possible, Fedotov goes down to the AHL actually does find his game. Like, it's a slower level. He might be able to, get more accustomed to the way, like, players are making plays, how to kind of read the NHL style of game or the North American style of game a little bit better, because the AHL is a little slower, and then maybe come back up and translate it. We'll have to see, but that it is a developmental league for a reason, and maybe some time does help him. So
yeah, and it might not even be like a waiving him type of thing. It might just be like a conditioning stint to be like, hey, he's stagnant, and we don't want him to be stagnant. So it's interesting. They'll roll with 3. I suspect, I don't think this is like the end of the road for Fedotov here.
I agree, yeah.
but he hasn't played well enough to earn the coach's trust. That I'm certain of, because he definitely doesn't have our trust. And I think he can be better than what he's been, but the goals that he's given up, there are like 5, 6 goals in those 3 games that are just unacceptable to give up at the NHL level. Even in the minor league level, you would be like, ugh. Now, I
This
don't
is
know if
not
he would have
good.
given them
Yeah.
up at the AHL level, so I don't want to say that, but it's just not acceptable. Like, they're completely momentum killing goals. Like, and you can even see the way the Flyers responded to Fedotov giving up those goals. They started laying out in front of every shot because,
Well, it drains your confidence as a team, right? If
right,
you're a team and not to say that your goal is giving up every shot or every goal, but if there's a good chance that he might give up a goal on, let's say, like a high danger chance, you might not take, a read or take a certain chance to try to make a play. You're just going to stay in your shell, be defensive. And obviously with the Flyers scoring woes, it's not something they can really afford to do at this point. So
yeah. And, with what was reported with Kolosov feeling isolated, I mean, on a team with Fedotov, Michkov, and Zamula, you know, there goes the language barrier, at least for him. I'm sure there's some competition between Fedotov and Kolosov at this point. But, you did hear Lawton kind of refer to Kolosov as Coley. And, he already has a nickname, and he called him out as having a good game. And so did John Tortorella. Obviously, that was one of the positives, that Tortorella, for the losing streak that they are on, seems incredibly calm. I will say that, which I
it's a little
think is good.
surprising, but
I think it's a good thing. I don't know
yeah.
if it's good or not, just because it's out of the norm.
I think it's just so early in the season
Yeah,
too that it's time not to panic. Obviously 9 games in, it's still a good chunk of the schedule, but how many teams have we seen have a bad 9 games and rebound and have a good season?
I
It's
mean,
happened before, so
Nashville didn't win a game, and then they won 3 in a row. So
it's hockey, right?
yeah,
It's not all, it doesn't have to all be negative. So
right. Yeah, and I guess Emil Andre got his call. He did play in the Montreal game. I actually thought he looked pretty good. Definitely didn't look out of place. No big mistakes or anything like that. Looked strong on the puck. Didn't get a ton of ice time, or the power play didn't look like dramatically better with him on it or anything like that. But it was his first game, and actually thought he looked pretty solid. And this is what you and I were talking about. It's the problem with his role. And the reality is that Zamula has his role right now. He's not going to take Drysdale's spot, and he's not going to take York's spot, and he's definitely not replacing the size of Sanheim, Johnson and Ristolainen and Sealer, right? So it kind of leaves him in this weird place where he's got to replace Zamula. And we already heard from Tortorella saying that he doesn't like Tortorella is not giving up on Zamula here. So I don't know how long he's going to be with the team. They might send him back down and then call him back up at a later date, potentially. Right now, they need 7 defensemen, though. So I'm not sure how they're going to handle this, but I could see him maybe rotating another game in for Zamula. But I thought he
yeah.
actually had a pretty good game. Like, uneventful to some degree, but good.
I thought he played well. I mean, there wasn't any like glaring defensive mistakes or giveaways or breakdowns, and that's what you want to see from a young player making their debut. You want to just see them look comfortable, be able to, add certain elements of their game, and actually be able to execute that. Like I thought his
Yeah,
first pass was pretty good. He did have some touches on the power play and didn't look bad, but it wasn't anything crazy.
sure.
He did have an interesting hit, actually. He closed the guy off in the first period and really
Yes.
checked him into the boards. And I thought that was noticeable. And for a smaller guy, too, to see some of the physicality, that's pretty refreshing. Like you said, and to your point, right, John Tortorella mentioned it's kind of a 1 game thing for Zamula, give him a little bit of a reset, let him watch from above, and then stick him back in. But, we have to know it's a results-based game, and if Zamula continues to perform the way he has been recently, just with some of the giveaways, we might see Andre get a little bit of a longer look and get some more chances. So I think it is performance-based in the sense where, hey, Andre had a good game. If Zamula comes back in the next game and looks terrible, or has a bunch of giveaways like he has the past handful of games here potentially, then maybe we do see more of Andre. The one thing I will note is I think Andre's passing just seems a little bit more decisiveness or decisive. And Zamula's, in a sense, I thought to start the year, he didn't look as hesitant, but now after kind of like, 8 a handful of games, 9, 10 games here, that hesitance in his game seems to be kind of creeping back in. So I do want to see more of that preseason Zamula, because I thought he had a really good preseason, and then kind of the regular season has dropped off a bit. Obviously, the preseason doesn't really matter, but it is a little bit surprising to me because I thought he had a good preseason. But Andre, I will say, like, I wouldn't mind them to just put him in there and have Johnson be the 7 too. I don't think you necessarily have to have Johnson in there. Like, I know they lack size, but I wouldn't mind to see, like, maybe even Zamula and Andre as well. Just try it for a game, see what happens.
You'd have to pick your opposition, right? Like, they're not going to do it. Like, some of the bigger, stronger teams that forecheck harder, I think they would be hesitant to do that. I think some fans online would probably like to see that, but I just don't know how viable it really is when you have a pretty undersized D as it is. Like, we don't have a big, strong D, and like even Nick Sealer is a strong guy. He's 6'2". He's not like a monster. They really have like Ristolainen and Johnson is the number 7. To your point, I don't know. I think I'll be honest. I think Andre has a higher ceiling than Zamula. I still see him as a potential top 4 defenseman. Yeah. So we'll see how he evolves, because he might, force their hand at a certain point.
If he just plays better than him at the end of the day, right? You have to think about it from a points perspective. Let's say Zamula's actively making plays on a nightly basis that is costing you wins, costing you points. At a certain time, do you just get fed up and say, hey, we have to put the guy who's the better player in right now into the lineup? So we'll see how it progresses, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Andre again soon, right?
Yeah. So the next thing we have outside of, I guess, the recent news, I guess it's kind of news too, but Matvei Michkov has been everything he's been advertised. Didn't have an amazing game against Montreal, though I would argue nobody did. Only one player really stuck out, and that was Sanheim, in my opinion. He was the most consistent. Couturier played well defensively in that game. I don't think anybody had a bad game. It was just a very flat game from a lot of guys. A lot of ups and downs that kind of just broke them even. It was maybe the most boring game. It was the most disappointing game for me personally, just because it was a very winnable game against an opposition that wasn't that good. But Michkov, prior to that game, did surpass Eric Lindros, and this stat is very cool. Outside of Peter Zezel, who had 9 points in his first 8 games, Matvei Michkov surpassed Eric Lindros, who had 8 points in his first 8 games. Now, Lindros was 18, and Matvei is 19. But still, for a teenager to break that pace, again, having a teenager, and if he continues this, it's insane. Having a teenager be at a point per game pace. There are only a handful of players that I can think of that have done that, and the 3 that come to mind are Sidney Crosby. I guess it wasn't Ovechkin, right? But it was Crosby, McDavid, Patrick Kane. Like, it's not
something. Bedard last year with the injury was close.
Right. He got injured, but he was close to a point per game as well. But the whole point of I'm sure there's been some other players too in the more modern era. Back in the day, it was a little more common. But to be able to be a point per game player, you're on your way to being that guy, that Kucherov, Nathan McKinnon level, the Malkin caliber guys. Like, at the very least, you're in that territory of being one of the upper echelon, one of the best players in the league. So far, he is continuing that trend. He didn't have a horrible game, but he did look gassed against Montreal. He didn't have the same energy, but a lot of guys, again, not just him withstanding, which is kind of the thing to take away from a lot of this stuff when people want to pick on certain players. Like, you have to look at how the team does as a whole. And the fact that Michkov is producing what he's doing on a pretty lackluster offense to start the year here, worse than last year. And that's why I don't even take the 5-on-5 production thing that seriously, because I'm like, well, if the other guys he's playing with aren't producing at 5-on-5, he's not Crosby at 24 years old. He's 19 years old on a right now below average team in the way they're playing, but a pretty middle of the road team. And if they're not producing, how is he going to produce at 5-on-5? At
Yeah,
least on power play,
you can't
he's
expect a
driving it.
19-year-old to carry your team offensively, despite the fact that he has actually looked like their probably most dangerous offensive player through 9 games in 19. And I think that's the thing to be the most excited about, right? Is the fact that he's just 19 years old. Not only, I mean, is he breaking like Eric Lindros's record at a year older with an extra point at that age that he's at. And that's, I mean, think about that, right? Like a Hall of Fame player. That's just a crazy stat, obviously, to
It's
be in that
insane.
kind of company. But the fascinating thing for Michkov is that he's really just adjusting. Like this is the adjustment period
I
for him
know. It's
in terms
crazy.
of the NHL level. Like I would say that most rookies in terms of the NHL, right? It typically just as a baseline, like 20, maybe 20 games to really adjust yourself to the speed, the pace, everything about the NHL game. But for most rookies, it probably might even take a full season to really get
Right.
acclimated to the NHL and what it's like to be a pro. So you have to factor that in that he's already doing this. He's already looking like the most dangerous player offensively for the Flyers at just 19 years old. Imagine, what's going to happen in a couple of years here where as he continues to develop, continues to understand what works for him at the NHL level, because I'm sure there's certain plays and things that he's tried that hasn't worked, but worked in the KHL. So all that stuff and the intricacies of what he can get away with at this level and what can work, that will take time for him to figure out and adjust. So I think as that happens, as his game develops, just all the elements that he can add, it's just interesting and fascinating, because I think there's even more of a gear for him to get to in terms of his offensive production, offensive creativity, and how he can kind of open things up for his teammates. But just preliminarily in the first 9 games, if you're a Flyers fan, you should definitely be excited about Matvei Michkov. And if you're a Flyers fan, you should be ecstatic in the sense that he's come here and looked this good this quick, because I think it just proves the sky is the limit with a player of his talent, especially as he learns the NHL game more and as he can add even more elements to his game and as he even gets stronger and faster, because that's a factor too. He's only 19.
Yeah. People keep talking about like, oh, how he's not a burner. It's like I don't care about
He's
any of that
very
stuff.
fast,
Yeah, he's much
actually.
faster than people are giving him credit for. He's already playing. He's averaging 18 minutes a night just coming into the NHL, and he's
And that's
playing
one of those
more games than
things.
he's ever played.
But that's one of those things to adjust to, Yariv. Like I don't think the KHL does back-to-back games, so he's probably never really had an experience of doing
Right,
that.
and it's
So
also not as
that's
physical.
Yeah, so that's why you see him in a back-to-back. He might not look as effective, but just think about like when he kind of gets used to what it takes to play in those types of games and he, looks more well-conditioned. I don't know if that's going to happen this season, but maybe down the line in a few years, right, as he gets ready for the NHL schedule, the rigors of that schedule. I just think there's so many things to be excited about with Michkov because he's looked so good so early that he can only really add to it from here, right? And that's
Yeah,
that's kind of my opinion on it.
yeah, absolutely. He's been everything as advertised, and obviously he found a home now with the Flyers top line. This was, I mean, I believe you agreed with me. I'm trying to remember back, but this was the line that I wanted to see. Even shifting TK over to the left wing, I thought that that would have been the move as well.
Put him with your
Um,
two best players, in my
right.
opinion. Yeah.
And again, because Michkov is not like Tippett level fast, right? There's no need to have to put him with the fastest player on the team or something like that, which I think maybe is why him and Tippett don't work that well. But with TK and Coots and Michkov, I mean, that Minnesota game was wild. And obviously, Michkov kind of got it started. He only had 2 points in that game where Konechny and TK both had 4 points, but I think that is a taste of, I'm sorry, 5 points. I think that is a taste of what we could see from the line. I don't think, Coots and TK are going to regularly put up 5 points a game, but the fact that they can actually be relied upon as the Flyers' top line, Couturier looks the best he has looked since at the very least beginning of last season. People were riding him really hard even though he was not playing poorly, and we were saying that when he was relegated to left wing, and we didn't agree with that demotion. We kept saying like, why is he playing lower? He's playing well. And then he finally has this big breakout game, and this line I think will really work. I think they're going to stick with this one probably for a while unless things get really bad, but I think they found something in here. And though I do like TK more on the right side, I think there are advantages that he can. There are things he can take advantage of on the left side. The same way Michkov's game excels.
One timers.
Right, the one timers, the ability to walk in, kind of facing the goalie. It did hurt him. I noticed a couple times, especially off the draw. Like I see exactly what he's talking about. But it's something he'll have to kind of adapt to. And Tortorella talked about it himself, right? Like they both are the type of wingers who are they're kind of all over the ice when they're out there. So one that makes Couturier even more important because he is so stable and such an intelligent player that he can read off the two of them really well and cover for them. Plus, he's a big body in the middle, which will really help them as they kind of fling the puck left and right. It does allow, for them the ability to, like, it gives them the ability to improvise and play their game off the wing since they both like to roam around a lot.
Yeah, I would say for that, Coots TK Michkov line, the first thing for me is Konechny, Couturier, they're essentially your best players, just in terms of all around game, probably offensively too. I mean, people might want to disagree with me in terms of Couturier, but I just think his intelligence, his hockey IQ, he just knows where to be, he knows the areas to go to score goals. He even mentioned it before the game, in Minnesota and even in Washington, that if the team is going to score here and get out of the slump, they need to get to the net. And that's exactly what they did against Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
So I think it only benefits Michkov to put him with your two smartest players, right? In terms of hockey IQ. He's so smart himself. I just think the three of them together are going to be able to read off each other in the offensive zone so well, create plays so well. Why wouldn't you want to put the guys that think the game at such a high level together so they can kind of create together and create offensive opportunities with one another? And the funny thing is we were kind of like complaining, and me and you were going back and forth saying, well, like, why is Couturier on the fourth line left wing in his 800th game? He hasn't played bad. He hasn't played worse than anybody else on the team. They kind of have all been struggling. I would kind of, give one of your better players more ice time, let him kind of carry you out of this in a sense, right? And it's funny though, because Tortorella, you have to give him credit in all aspects because he does know what he's doing. He puts him on the fourth line and then you move him back to first line center and gets, not immediately a 5-point game, but he looks much better in that second Washington game. He's screening the goalie on 2 goals. He's all around the net. And then he really pops off against, Minnesota with 3 goals and 2 assists. Just to kind of go over the stat line, I'm sure everybody's seen it already, but Couturier, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points, plus 5. Konechny, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, plus 4. Michkov, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, plus 4. So that line just had a field day against Minnesota. To even hammer it home, they had a 70% expected goals for at 5-on-5. So that just shows every time they were on the ice, the puck was in Minnesota's end. They were controlling play, controlling the quality chance battle, high danger chance battle when they were on the ice. So I think it just is a no-brainer to obviously keep them together. You could see that there's chemistry forming. So at this point, I think just keep that trio together, see what they can do for an extended period. I would also say that it's good to see Couturier back on the second power play. I think just him as a net front presence, even if it's not on the first unit, it's good to have him on the second unit because we saw, right? Like, look at 2 of his goals, though they're, maybe like not the nicest or the most creative goals or anything like that. Sometimes they need to be greasy goals, and he's a guy that can really pot rebounds in front of the net. So I think it makes sense to have him back on the power play there as well.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I do expect that line to continue to, play better and probably even produce consistently as they really kind of figure each other out and gain more chemistry. We know Couturier and Konechny have chemistry, but I think they're still learning Michkov and kind of how he attacks the game and kind of what his tendencies are. So I think as that progresses, you'll see them get even better and probably more of a tight knit unit in terms of like their passing, scoring chance creation. But we've been calling for that line really since the offseason, so I'm happy that Tortorella and the staff kind of went to that and look to be staying with it going ahead.
Yeah, I think it's big. It's very important because it allows the other lines to be restructured in a way that be successful. And we'll talk about how the Flyers have not been doing that. I don't think that is the majority of their problem, but I am not happy with the current line combinations at all, at least with the forwards. But let's get into the next topic. So several Flyer, I think it was Lawton and Sanheim, They both used the word disconnected.
Tortorella as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so Tortorella talked about how the team is not playing in fives. And so I've been freaking out on Twitter every single time the Flyers don't shoot the puck when they're in the offensive zone. I think a lack of shots on net is a bit deceiving with how the team has played because they've had opportunities to shoot. Early on, they were missing the net. Now they just stopped shooting. And there's a big problem when you don't shoot. One, you create no chaos in the offensive zone. A lot of times you see it's one or two Flyers, which is the disconnected thing, in the zone by themselves, and then they're trying to beat guys and hold the puck, and the play is dead. You're not beating 2, 3 guys. I keep saying shoot the puck on net and go to the net and get the offensive draw. There are so many good things that can happen. Right now, the Flyers are actually doing much better on the faceoff dot than people want to believe. I tweeted out the statistics last night against Montreal. They absolutely dominated the faceoff dot. Sean Couturier is dominating the faceoff dot in particular. He's got to be over 60% now after last game, which would put him probably in the top 3, top 4 best faceoff men in the league. They need to start moving as a unit. And we talked about this last season a lot. When the Flyers weren't doing well, there were large gaps between the forwards and the defensemen, and they were not moving up as a unit. You know, like I think I even joked around. I said, ducks fly together from Mighty Ducks. Like the idea that they're constantly isolating themselves is killing them. And because they're not shooting, they're also creating these like stupid turnovers. And a lot of times when it is 2 or 3 guys, they're going for the more difficult play instead of just shooting it. They're not, and Couturier said this himself. He said, "Aim for the pads, aim low." They're not
Great
doing
rebounds.
that.
Yeah.
These are simple hockey plays. I hear online they're not fast enough. They don't have this. None of that is the problem. It is not their talent. None of that. Like last season should have taught you all of that. I would argue this is a more talented team than they were last season. They are not executing on the simplicity of the game, the simple plays that make you successful, that get you into the playoffs. Getting you to win in the playoffs is the talent difference, and that is where you need star players if you want to win a Stanley Cup. But to be competitive on a nightly basis is not required to have the most talented team. They have enough talent and speed and skill to already be a competitive team in the league. They are not executing on the basics of the game. The gaps are too large. They're not moving up as a unit. Their decision making has not been great. They've been maybe forcing the play, but creating unnecessarily risky plays with pinches and passes into the middle that are not open, where they really just need to get it on net, get a whistle, and then start off the faceoff dot, and then start clean with the entire team in the offensive zone. These little bits of plays, I think, are compounding into what we're seeing as terrible 5-on-5 play. And I think it can be fixed, absolutely. And they can get back to where they were last season. And when they were at their worst last season, and they did have some games where they didn't play well, even when they were playing well, that is the type of way they played. And that's what we're seeing majority of to start the season. And we're only seeing 1 or 2 periods a game where they're actually executing on their playing style. And even the game that people harp on when they lost, not the first game they lost to Washington, but the second game where people are like, oh, they're not shooting, or they didn't get any shots on net, they got dominated. They did not get dominated by Washington. They gave up 4 goals on 10 shots. That is not getting dominated. That is Fedotov not playing well in net. And the reality is that they were actually playing at least more cohesive and as a tight
low
unit.
Event hockey. They weren't trying to give a goal up, and that's kind of what happens when you have a goaltender in the net that you might not be all that confident in, right?
But they weren't playing. But to that point, that low event hockey, you can wear down a team by being low event and then catching them,
and
which is what
open it up, yeah.
And that's what I want to see them at least get back to that. And then when the confidence is back, then you can try the more skill stuff. But they really need to simplify their game. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I just think a lot of their issues right now are structure based, right? They were a team that
Yes.
was very honed into their structure last year, honed into the system. We're very on the same page in terms of how they kind of executed the system, how they were kind of breaking the puck of their own end. Zone exits, moving the puck up the ice, all that right now. It's very discombobulated, I would say. It's very sloppy, right? And we've been saying this for a while. It's just the passing hasn't been on point. The passing is not crisp. First of all, they're just taking a shitload of time really to move out of their defensive zone up to the neutral zone into the offensive zone. Like they are having a lot of trouble moving the puck up the ice in transition. Like we saw them be a very potent transition offense team last season. That is not the case this season in terms of the
Gaps.
way they're creating odd man rushes, right? And to your point and what you stated, it's because the forwards are so far up looking for that home run pass. The pass isn't actually there. They need to be closer into support their defender and the defender exiting the zone, so there's more outlets to open up different types of plays through the neutral zone, and that's not happening, unfortunately. And a lot of it is because they're just trying to force plays
They're
because they
pressing.
are they are
Yeah.
struggling offensively. And I mean, even though they won that Minnesota game, it's not like they played that well. They only had like 6 or 7 shots through 2 periods, right? And
Right.
to your point, the Flyers last season were so successful because they were a volume shooting team. When you take a ton of shots, like they were taking a plus 30 shots on net every night essentially last season. And when you do take that many shots, something will go in for you. And that's how you can kind of spark yourself, even if you might not be playing your best game. And as we saw last night, right? Like they scored one goal and you saw the team kind of get a spark and they looked way better. If they would have taken a lot more shots, would that goal have come a lot sooner? I wouldn't say last night because they were kind of even with Montreal in the shot total, but just in general, right? Like as a kind of rule of thumb going forward,
They should
they
have
should
outshot Montreal there
they
last night.
should yeah they should have really been overloading shots as a sticking point this season. I think it's kind of funny though, like in a sense, a lot of this is very ironic to me because I mean you have a lot of the fan base, a lot of pundits, calling for the Flyers special teams and power play to improve, which it really has.
Yes.
And the 5-on-5 is completely tailed off. It's almost like the opposite, like kind of like a bizarro world from last season, right?
Yeah.
Where like the 5-on-5 was so good, the power play is complete shit. But now the
Power
power
plays
play
like 26% or
the
something.
power play is 23.5%, 10th in
Okay.
the league. If you would have said that through 9 games, you would have said, hell yeah, sign me up for that, right? And their penalty kill, also very good, 85.7% and 7th in the league. So the special teams really has been good for the Flyers here to start off, which is very funny because that's what everybody was calling for. But the 5-on-5 has dropped off a cliff. And that's where you're playing most of the hockey game, though, right? And that's kind of why they need to get it sorted because look at the NHL. If you cannot hold your own at 5-on-5, you cannot be a competitive team. It doesn't matter how good your special teams are. You're just not on special teams that often throughout a 60-minute game. So the Flyers just need to find a way to really execute their system more efficiently. I think one thing for them, like you said, is to not hesitate on shots, especially when you're struggling to create offense. Who knows what can happen? Rebound in front, slot chance occurs. If anything, just take a shot at to get a face off, and at least the play doesn't go down the other way and ends
Right.
up in the back of your
Right.
net,
Which
right?
has been killing us.
Yeah. So I think for 5-on-5, the main thing for them, if the main thing to get going, will have to be supporting each other as a 5-man unit. Like if there's somebody, on a board battle, let's say with a defender, instead of letting it be one-on-one, obviously don't lose your coverage, but try to go in and help them out if you can. At least retrieve the puck and start from
But
there.
they're not even with each other
I
a
know
lot
that's
of
the
times.
problem. They're just in they're not in really the correct position. I
Right.
think a lot of it starts with the way they're breaking the puck out. They're taking so long to break the puck out. You kind of have guys moving all over the place to open things up, and then things are just getting lost from
That's
that
good.
point.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So we'll see if they can get it on track. I do think these back-to-back games aren't doing them any favors here. Like the Washington back-to-backs last week, these back-to-backs on the weekend, because you can't really practice. You're not going to practice a team who's struggling after two sets of back-to-backs. So they really haven't had a lot of chance to practice and kind of work on their system. So you have to hope maybe with some practice time coming up, they can kind of get back to that 5-on-5 play we saw last year. Because if they can even get that back to 50% of how they were playing on 5-on-5 last season and keep the special teams up, they'll be a much better team, actually. even a fraction of it. But if they continue to play this way 5-on-5, I mean, it's going to be hard for them to win a lot of games.
Majority of the game is played at 5-on-5, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the next thing I wanted to bring up was, and I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to pull up Puckpedia.
Let's go.
So the Flyers did put together lines the other night.
Not good ones, in my opinion.
And I hated them.
Yeah, I didn't like them either. But Yariv and I talked offline. Am I sharing
Do you see Puckpedia?
Yeah, yep, I see it.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, Yariv and I were talking offline basically about what we would have as the lines right now. Obviously keeping that de facto first line in place because you know it's working. So I think that's the main thing. If you're the Flyers right now, you can kind of get the second line or maybe find some chemistry with the third line. At least you take some pressure off that top line and you're not really relying on them solely offensively because that's essentially what's happening right now. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I don't think anything that Tortorella did was irrational. I don't think Morgan Frost has played his best hockey. And I like, to some degree, I really like the next man up thing because it does create that constant push.
Competition.
Right, that you're not safe in your spot, right? I'll drop Couturier, I'll drop Frost, I'll drop Lawton, I'll drop anybody on this team that isn't playing up to their snuff. And people thought like Tyson Forrester was immune to being benched, right? But he's not playing the same way he was last year, and he got benched, right? So it's just like it's a constant like carousel, which I do think is hurting them to some degree. I don't think it's hurting them as much as is kind of publicized, but I do think there needs to be some consistency. But when you do make line combinations, creating 3 third lines is not effective either. And
at
that's
least have one top line, right?
Well, they had their top line, but like when you put Frost with Delorier, right, and Forrester, like on the fourth line, I'm going to say this. I respect the hell out of Nick Delorier. I think at his role, he's great. He's not a burden on your team. He doesn't hurt you defensively. He is kind of he hurts you a little bit offensively just because he doesn't have much pizzazz, though he did even hit a post. It's not like he's been horrendous. So I don't like the idea of picking on Nick Delorier because he does have a role in this team, and I do think he's a plus to the team. So I don't think he's a negative. But what I want to see is this lineup that you and I talked about, right? Like, I want to see that you are not afraid to put your lines together, put your skilled guys together, and let them work it out, right? Like, the fact he hasn't been, if you love that fourth line, and let's say I switch Lawton, because I think Lawton, Paling, and Cates are all interchangeable in this lineup. Let's just go with that for a second. That fourth line last year that you had a Noah Cates, Paling, and Hathaway, they worked really well last year. And I like Hathaway a lot. Putting him with Frost and Tippett, you're not going to get what you want. I know why they did it. It's not irrational, but it's a temporary line. And I'm a little sick of temporary lines because they're not going to really, you're not putting your best lineup out there, right? So you have to create a condition where these lines can start building some chemistry and getting their system down. That's why, so you and I have talked about this, like Joel Farabee with Owen Tippett, Morgan Frost. It was not tried like pretty much at all last year. The previous year was, and they showed chemistry. I think Tippett and Frost need to stay together. I think they have chemistry. Tortorella knows they do. He's brought it up himself. I think Frost has bought himself enough, especially because he played well to start the season, to have a down game or two and stick with Tippett, who's also having a down game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's had several games where he hasn't played the best, and he hasn't really had his ice time reduced or been dropped to the fourth line. Right. So at a point, you have to look at it like your center depth is not good. You can't say, I mean, I do like Noah Cates, but I don't think he's a guy at this point that you can actively put as a 2C and expect him to really produce offensively. Right. So it's need to have Frost in that role.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. He created three third lines together. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I don't think it's irrational what he did, but I don't know if that's really going to help them get out of this tailspin. I'm not a coach, okay? Tortorella's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. But when I look at this lineup, and the reason I have Cates in the middle is because he's better on the draw than Scott Lawton right now, at least this season so far, and he's younger. So I think he has a little bit more of an upside than Scott Lawton at this point. So like the third line, I'm like Forrester's struggling. Brink is not struggling offensively, but he's struggling defensively. Let Noah Cates play that role that Sean Couturier plays with Konechny and Michkov. See if you can get the two kids to play together and see if they can bring. They like have never played together really, at least not since like the beginning of last season. I'm curious.
Forrester and Brink?
Yeah, Brink and Forrester have not.
I
really
would say
been a line.
no, yeah, they haven't been in the NHL, Yariv, but I would say actually I love them together. Reason being, they played a lot at the AHL level too together,
Right.
And on the power play. So like, let them try to work something out, right?
Exactly. That's exactly my thought. And I have Noah Cates in there, but I think you really can supplement Paling.
I agree.
Or Lawton. The only thing I thought is like I want to see Paling and Hathaway together again. They worked so well together at grinding on other teams. Sometimes that's the game we need to play, and you want to have the best fourth line that you can have out there. And Nick Delorier is not going to be that. Okay, that's the reality. Sometimes you need him in the lineup. You know, like I was confused why he played against Montreal, but then when you saw that situation with Coots and what's his name, Jack-Eye, like I'm like, oh, that's why Delorier is playing, and I didn't even really consider that. So it's like it's not irrational what he's doing, but I think these lines, some combination of these lines, could be what helps them produce more at 5-on-5, and at least that second line let players who are struggling go with each other and struggle together for a little bit, allow them to help each other find their way out of their struggle and get comfortable with one another. So like that's when I look at those lines that he put out the other night, I'm like, okay, I get it, but I knew it was temporary. It was so temporary they didn't even last the game.
Well, you just know that Noah Cates isn't going to stay as a 2C long term unless he really shows some offensive upside. And I mean, he didn't in that game. I don't know if he's going to moving ahead here, but I think he's more suited to be either third line, fourth line type of player. Frost's skill set is just more suited to play with more offensively skilled players and be kind of in that second line role, right? I think for Farabee, he actually looked pretty good last night. I thought he was around some scoring chances. Personally, I mean, Frost and Farabee have always had chemistry, even dating back to like training camps of years past. I've always kind of called for them to play together.
Right.
Since Tortorella has been the coach, they really have never been put together very often. I'd love for them to just stick with this second line, but I don't know. It just seems like Tortorella has these combos in a blender. I kind of do want him to just settle it down a little bit, even if the team has a couple games where they continue to struggle, because putting them in the blender doesn't seem to work. So just let a couple of lines stick for maybe more than a period or two and see if they can kind of create something, right? Because at a certain point, you need to let guys actually play together to develop chemistry. I know everybody's saying, oh, it's the same players as last year, so much of the same team. Sure, that's the case, but like you still need to play with the same line mates consistently to develop more chemistry, kind of be on the same page as one another out there and be in sync on the ice, right? That matters. Even if you've played together for years, just being together, practicing together helps. I really do think they should go with this setup. Who knows what's going to happen next game or anything like that. But at the very least, I think the top two lines at the very least, I mean, do whatever you want with the bottom two, but I think the top two should be this. And I do definitely think that Bobby Brink needs to re-enter this lineup. I think he should not be out of the lineup for 2 straight games with Nick Delorier in. I like Delorier. I just think from a hockey perspective and a goal scoring perspective, he's not really bringing you much. And even look at last game, like, did he fight Arbor Xhekaj? Isn't that kind of what he's in the line to do, is to fight those guys?
But he wasn't on the ice. He played 5 minutes.
But that's what I mean, though. He didn't even fight him anyways.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the point then? If he's supposed to be there to fight the other team's goon, then he didn't even do it. So what's the benefit, right? Like,
right. Yeah, and then you look at that fourth line. When the last time that these three were together was Seattle.
Yeah,
and they dominated.
They played really well, exactly.
And I'm looking at Boston that's coming up. I'm like, Boston is a rough and tumble team with skill. I was like, that's a line. That fourth line could be a pain in the ass for Boston. And I'm like, that's why I looked at it and I'm like, yeah. And then let Noah Cates be the defensive center that he is, right? And let him play with the two kids and see if they can find some stability playing together. Because like Forrester is definitely not bad defensively. Now I get that
No.
Brink is a little bit, uneven in the defensive zone, but he does have the playmaking skills to
Yeah.
potentially feed Forrester and get Forrester going a little bit, right? So I don't think that these
And
lines would be a problem.
yeah, and for me it's just puzzling because like if you look at something here, right? The Flyers right now they're 19th in the league in goals for. So they have 26 goals for. Not the greatest, not the worst, kind of middle of the pack. You're a team struggling to create offense. You're struggling to score a little bit. How is having Bobby Brink gonna help out of the lineup gonna help you score more, right? Like he's a guy that can put up points for you. I'm not exactly sure what his output is so far this season. I think he has 3 or 4 points, something like that. But
Yeah.
I do think like you're actively taking scoring away from your lineup by keeping him out. Even if you don't like his defensive game, your team's not scoring a lot, and you got to have him in there. Just to at least let him develop. Like he has 4 points in 6 games. He's an offensive player. Give him some extended time, even if you don't like it defensively, because he can put up some points for you, which he's already
Right.
shown early on. So
Yeah, and I think if you put him with Forrester, who last year was exceptional defensively, Noah Cates, who's very good defensively,
you kind
should
of eliminate the risk. Yeah.
right, exactly. Should compensate. It allows him to again, because he's a little bit like Konechny, where he's a little bit of a wild card out there. I don't know. I see these lines, and this is what I want to see. Um, so
Yeah,
let's.
we'll see
Oh,
what Torts
sorry.
does, I guess. But I
Yeah,
agree, Yariv. Like me and you kind of went back and forth. I think this is what they should go with. Will they go with this? I don't know.
I
But
don't think
I
so.
think at the least, these top two lines would probably be a good start.
Yeah, load up on your talent at least on the top two lines, and let the second line work it out. Let Tippett and Frost work it out, and I think Farabee is it because Tyson Forrester is young. I think Farabee is the clear choice there. He's a little older than Forrester. He's a little older than Brink. I think people don't realize how young Farabee is because he's still been here. But again, his skill set fits Tippett and Frost. He plays around the net.
Yeah.
It makes sense. To us, this makes sense. And we've been right about a lot of line combinations. And, with all the Frost should play with Michkov talk, and, he tried Frost and Tippett, and I didn't like it. I was like, I don't think this is going to
We've
work.
we've kind of been looking for Couturier and Michkov and Connect, like I said, since we did these line
Right.
combinations in the
Since last
offseason.
season. Yeah.
Yeah. So not to say that we know that these would work or anything, but I just think to what you've tried to this point, it hasn't worked. So why not, right?
Yeah. I'd love to be proven wrong, but so far I have not been. So I just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the podcast, hit the notification bell to get notified on when we release the episodes, and also hit the bell, or I'm sorry, also follow us on iTunes and Spotify for the audio versions, and give us a rating there and a review if you can. That'd be great. Okay. Now we look at the D. So the D unit, they're without York. We know how they've been adjusting. I have the pairings as they sit right now. I do have Andre on the outside. Could the combinations change? Potentially. I think what was a bright spot, because Travis Sanheim had such a strong. He's been very good. He's still the same Sanheim as last season, in my opinion. I don't think he's had like bad games. Offensively, he's starting to get going. He had a goal and two goals and 1 assist last game. I think there might be, and we've seen it in the past, some potential here with Ristolainen. They're going to have to let it play out a little bit longer. I think Sealer has helped stabilize Drysdale. And again, we know that we talked about the mix already of Zamula and Andre and what happens with the rotating of the role. Could they get Andre and Zamula into the lineup? Potentially at some point. We'll see. Right, but this is kind of that balanced lineup. The one thing I really like about Ristolainen playing with Sanheim is that, and he even referenced this himself, it takes some of the physical edge off of Sanheim, because Sanheim, when York is out there, has to be the big man too.
He has
But
to be
when
more physical. Yeah.
right, but when Risto's out there, Risto can handle some of that brunt. So when you look at this lineup, we do wonder when York comes back, if Sanheim and Risto do work out, can we get York on another pairing and see if we can create two two pairings that the Flyers can really rely on, and then kind of fall back to York and Sanheim throughout a game if they need it, but allow them to mix up. Now, I don't know exactly how this would work out. The other option is to put York with Ristolainen and put Nick Seeler with Sanheim, and then you can drop Drysdale to the bottom pairing. At least for even strength, he'll still play top power play, so he'll still be getting minutes and whatnot. But all of this is possible. I don't know exactly how to play it out, but I do think, at least on paper, the Flyers have it right from what they would do. Sanheim did play with Drysdale at times yesterday, but when you put the two of them together, you lose a lot of offense in the other pairing. So I don't think that that's really that possible.
Stylistically, Yariv, I don't think it's the best thing for Sanheim and Drysdale, just because they're both going to want to handle the puck so much, right? Like Drysdale's such a rushing defenseman with his skating. Sanheim's kind of similar, right? Long strides, loves to rush the puck up the ice.
Yeah.
I think we've seen Sanheim and Ristolainen be effective in the past, so it's not too surprising for me to see them get put back together and look good, because I think there's a familiarity there. When you know where your defense partner is going to be, how they play certain situations, it can help you out. And Sanheim and Ristolainen, though they haven't played together that often recently, there was a time where they played together for almost like a whole season and a half. I think dating back to Alain Vigneault's time, right? So there was a time where they really were playing together a lot. So it's not surprising they can kind of slip back into that pairing, and they have a lot of chemistry, and they kind of know how to play off each other, how to read off each other. I do think it opens up Sanheim more offensively in a sense, because I think Ristolainen might be that guy that they're looking for on that pair for more physicality, more of like clearing the crease, where Sanheim's kind of, not to say Ristolainen doesn't have some offensive ability, because he does, but Sanheim's the clear kind of offensive defenseman on this pairing. Whereas with York and Sanheim, I think it was a little less unclear, because you could have York rushing the puck sometimes, right, and he has a lot of offensive ability. And you have Sanheim there, to your point, where he's bigger, so he's kind of playing more of that clear the crease, close players off on the boards type style. And he doesn't have to really do that with Ristolainen, because that's the style that Ristolainen really loves to play. And he's always a physical defender out there. So I really do like the Sanheim-Risto pairing. I hope they can continue to keep it up. And to your point, if they do, and you have York back into the lineup here, I think it really actually strengthens the Flyers defense in a way to move Sanheim and York away from each other. Not to say that the pairing isn't great, because I think it's a really good top pairing, but I just think that it takes a lot away from your other two pairings, and you might not have a real like second pairing with York on the top pairing with Sanheim. I think it kind of gives you like a top pairing and almost two third pairings in a sense right now. Just with the way, Seeler, Drysdale, York, and Risto were playing together. Whereas I think if you keep Sanheim and Risto together, let's say you put York and Drysdale together, and then you do like Zamula and Seeler, I think that potentially could be an optimal defense where you have two solid pairs. Either one of those pairs maybe could get the brunt of the usage on any given night, depending on which one's playing better. And you kind of rotate the third pair in there when you see fit. And the last thing to mention too is, if you do kind of go with that type of setup, firstly, I think York and Drysdale could really play off each other well. I just think their skill sets would be interesting to see. And also, I think Zamula would benefit from having a defensive stalwart like Seeler with him, especially just in terms of like some coverages in the defensive zone. And it might open him up to be more offensive as well. So
yeah, I think we could see that too, right? Like something like this, right? Potentially when York comes back. I don't know. They might just go right back to what they had, right? They're comfortable with those. The other one I was thinking of is moving Drysdale down the lineup and and this was the other one I saw, is like Nick Seeler's been really solid. Like maybe he has good chemistry with Sanheim. Maybe you can play York, because you look at the sizing, and Ristolainen's a mammoth, right? And York's not that big. So you can put the two of them together.
They played a bit before and looked pretty good. I didn't mind it.
And then Sealer's just reliable in all situations, right? At least at 5-on-5 and on the PK. And then again, still allows Sanheim to do the same thing and play the right side, which Tortorella likes. And then if it's a third pairing of Drysdale, then I think you can be a lot riskier with who his partner is if he's playing less crucial minutes at 5-on-5. And you might be able to do Zamula Drysdale even. And Zamula's at least a big body. Or you can try Andre with Drysdale, and that would be kind of an undersized pairing, obviously. But Andre could be a Timonen type. We're still waiting to find out. Could be a very mobile bottom pairing, and then there's always the option of throwing Johnson in there too, right?
Yeah.
So just options. We have no idea what they're going to do at this point, and right now York's out anyway. So we'll probably see what they put together, the same lines for a little bit on the D for now, I imagine. But I also don't know how great Johnson is on the right side versus the left side too, just because he's a very simple type of defenseman at this point, right? But he is savvy enough that you can rotate him to the right hand side. He's not going to make. He hasn't made any mistakes. He's just kind of an offensive wash.
He's a
That's the only
solid.
downside.
He's a solid, seventh defenseman. You can put him in there when you need him in a pinch. He's not really going to kill you or make any egregious mistake. He's also not going to affect the game in a positive way to like a high degree or anything like that. But he isn't going to make that glaring turnover or anything.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
what you want from a number 7. You just want a guy that can be steady and reliable. And Johnson's played his role well. I think it's just the rest of the defense that, in a sense, they've been giving up a lot of chances. But also, I mean, it's hard to fault them because they haven't gotten a lot of goal support too. So it can be tough, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that is the Phantoms. Not too much to say about the Phantoms. I do want to say, this is what you and I have been talking about. Another rough start for the Phantoms. Now, they're not playing horribly. They lost to the Grand Rapid Griffins twice in a row, back to back. They lost, I think the first game was 5-2, and then they lost 4-3. They were down 2-1 in the game. They came back and actually took a lead. And I'm sorry, they came back. They were down 2-1. They came back and tied it. And then gave up a goal with less than 2 minutes left in the game to lose it in regulation. I know they don't have Andre, but they have enough talent to be at least a pretty good team at the AHL level. And we're seeing kind of again that it just I hate hating on Lappy because I like the guy so much, but I just don't get the sense that they're being put together in the best way. I don't like his line combinations either. I don't know the Phantoms as well as I do the Flyers, but I don't see what I want to see. And like right now, Ule Lixell has got 2 assists in 6 games. This is a guy who's been above a point per game player. Elliot Denoyer is still stagnant, 2 assists in 5 games. Sammy Tuamala is killing it. He's got 6 points in 6 games, 2 goals, 4 assists. He's a -5. Anthony Richard's got 5 points in 5 games. Rodrigo Abel's got 4 points in 6 games. Yeah, it's just they're not doing that well. So I will say right now, A2 Makaniemi's got the best stats. Cal Peterson got destroyed.
That's not too surprising, I think, at this point, right?
And it seems like Makaniemi is going to take over because Cal Peterson is he's just not a good goalie anymore. I don't know what happened to him, but he's not great at the AHL level.
I'll give the guy props.
At the NHL level.
He got a $5 million contract. At least he made his money. It sucks that he's not a good goalie anymore, but at least from a personal level, the guy made his money, and that's good for him. But at this point, like, he's not even looking like an AHL caliber goalie. He might even be ECHL caliber, which is really not great, right? Like, think about this. Like, to sign a guy on a PTO that nobody signed, and for him to be better than you, like, that's just not. It's not a good sign.
Yeah, he's at the. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't even play in North America anymore after his contract.
Might be the end of the road for him.
Yeah, because he just does not seem to have it anymore.
But to your point, like with LaPerriere, I just think even though Lappy's a great guy and a lot of the values are there to kind of pass on to these younger kids and these prospects to try to develop them. At a certain point, it doesn't matter what level you're teaching at or what the turnover is at the AHL level. Sometimes you just need a new voice, right? Like a new coach. How long has he been the coach of the Phantoms at this point? It's been several seasons.
Yeah.
So I just think at this point, I don't want to call for anybody's head or anything like that, but I mean, the results speak for themselves, right? It's just not been great to start. So
They're always getting their butts kicked by the same teams who also don't seem to have like a ton of talent. You know, they're not like thriving prospect pools with the top prospects in the league on them. It's like Wilkes-Barre Scranton kicks our butt every time. Hartford kicks our butt every time. Grand Rapids just beat us twice in a row. It's like they're just it's just not good.
they're not that good right now, at least to start. But
No.
yeah.
And he prioritizes big players over skill every time. If you look at his lineups, like unless the guy is clear cut, you know, like he doesn't play goal scorers over like Jacob Gauthier is not a bad AHL player at all. He loves him. Rhett Gardner doesn't produce much at the AHL level, right? Top line center for the team.
And then you have guys like Gendron who are kind of suffering and
He's
playing
not
in bottom
barely
six
playing him.
roles.
He plays and scores a goal, then doesn't play again. And it's just like I get it, but it's a development, and I want to see the guys with skill who have the ability to make the NHL get more ice time, and I want to see more success. And again, I don't know if he's the problem. I don't follow the Phantoms as tightly as I do the Flyers. If I did,
same here.
I would have a better idea, but I don't love the results. And again, it's still very early, but I don't love the results. We'll give them time. You know, they're still only 6 games into their season, but also
we're saying the same things last season about him, too.
Right. I feel like I'm saying the same thing about him
constant
every season.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
That I feel like they're always underperforming. Like I always feel like this team is just underperforming consistently. And it doesn't mean he's a bad coach, but he might just not be the right coach for the Phantoms. I don't know. Yeah, so we skipped over one topic, the J Fresh prospect, or I'm sorry, the J Fresh stats on the Flyers. So you want to read those out, and then we'll do our prospects.
A couple team stats. I just thought it was interesting, just to kind of look at the Flyers played to this point. So, the Flyers goals saved above expected is last in the league. They're a minus 10.9 in that category.
Nice.
I think we all know who the culprits might be on that one, or the culprit, I guess. Really, Fedotov struggling. But surprisingly enough, actually, if you go over to top and worst goalies by goals save above expected, Sam Urson is a negative 4.8. He's 65th in the league in goals save above expected. And Ivan Fedotov is just a couple ahead of him at 67, and he's a negative 5.8. I think for Urson, he's played really well. It's more the defense in front of him. For Fedotov, obviously, we kind of know the story on that one. Goal differential above expected, the Flyers are a minus 11.5, meaning that the models and the stats have been expecting them to score a lot more than they have, which is what we kind of seen. Like, look at that Washington game. They created a lot of chances, didn't score much, right? So we've seen them kind of push, but they haven't really broken through a lot of times offensively, except for that Minnesota game. So it does make sense. 5-on-5 expected goals against per 60. The Flyers are actually 12th in the league in that metric. So they've actually been not, they've been a middle of the road team essentially defensively. They have a 2.37 5-on-5 expected goals against per 60. So that means they're really only allowing like 2 to 3 goals a game typically. So it, like I said, it hasn't really been all that bad for them defensively, but it's really the offense that has kind of killed them, because their 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60 is 2.29. So really, their expected goals for is less than the expected goals against, meaning that they're typically getting outscored on a regular basis, which is what we've been seeing. And that goes back to what we talked about with the 5-on-5 play. They just haven't looked like a 5-man unit. They haven't really been executing and moving up the ice together very well. They've looked very discombobulated, so that's affected their ability to score a 5-on-5. And then also a couple other things in terms of like 5-on-5 heat maps. If you look at what Jay Fresh posted, I wish I could pop it up on the screen. I should have sent it to you, Yariv, but it's all good. But pretty much other than Konechny, Michkov, and Couturier, the rest of the team has just been playing low event hockey. in terms of like where they are offensively and defensively for goals for and goals against. Those are the only three players that have a positive expected goals for on the Flyers. So
It's a
not
bummer.
great.
It's a
Yeah, not
bummer.
great.
They got to figure it out. They got to figure it out. This team can be a lot better than how they've been performing.
Agreed. Yeah.
So yeah, quick we'll do the prospect updates and then we'll end it after that. So the first thing Jet Luchenko obviously mentioned already, he got his first point. Yeah, he was a -3 in that first game and he got one assist again in a 10-1 loss. So kind of hard to gauge Luchenko's
Yeah.
performance when his
The
team got walloped.
The one thing though that we will mention before the other prospects is that there has been rumors he might get
Yes.
traded to a contender in the OHL. I think there was some rumors of like London.
Jeff Merrick
Yeah.
and Kevin Kurz were talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. So interesting, but I'd imagine if you're a Flyers fan, I think having Lachenko go to a more competitive team than Guelph is probably the best thing for his development. So you have to hope that something
Especially
like that can
London.
happen. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, especially with a couple other Flyers prospects as well. That would
He's is he from London? Is
He's
that where
from London. Yeah,
yeah. So that's
exactly.
why it's such a big rumor and he was like a London kid. A Flyers fan and a London Knights fan. So would be cool. Would be cool to see him play with Barkey and Bonk and just be
Yeah,
able to just watch that team and go all in.
that's what I mean. I think that would be great in terms of like long-term development for all those three because you develop chemistry together too, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So I suspect if he does get traded, it's probably gonna be a little later in the season,
yeah,
right?
around playoff trade deadline type of
Yeah.
situation.
But we know he'll probably be on the World Juniors team. I can't see a scenario that he won't be. He'll most likely be playing a bottom six role, maybe more, but he'll probably be one of the best defensive players in that tournament, really offensively defensive players. So I could see him playing, a crucial like third line role there. We'll see. Hopefully he does more than that. But I'm excited to see what his productivity is going to be now that he's back in the OHL. Again, already a point a game, but we'll see how his team does because it's going to be frustrating if his team can't get the puck. I'm sure they're not going to lose 10-1 every night or anything like that, but that's just not a great way to come, welcome home. But
Definitely.
yeah, we'll update you guys as we hear more stuff on the trade stuff. I'm sure that's probably going to pick up, and if it's coming from Jeff Merrick, there's probably value to
Some
it,
credibility.
and Kevin Kurz, it probably is going on, and I imagine they might not be the only teams even trying to get Luchenko out of there because if that team knows that Luchenko probably will not be there next year at the rate that he's moving, so they're going to want to try to get something for him to rebuild their squad. So I could totally see him getting moved. All right, let's do our prospect updates. Let me read the first 15 and then you can pepper in the other ones and then do the goaltending. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Ilya Paltov, back to a point a game. He's got 4 goals, 12 assists, 16 points in 16 games, a +10. So back to his scoring ways. Again, his team is kind of high scoring, but he's doing well in the MHL. Jack Berglund has essentially graduated, from what I can tell, from the Fjarkastad BK J20 team. He did have 12 points in eight games, 7 goals, 5 assists. Since then, he has 1 assist in 9 games for the senior team at the SHL level. Not great production, but it seems like he's too good for the juniors. Maybe not 100% ready for the SHL. But the fact that he's playing there, I assume he's playing a bottom line role. So maybe that's why there's no production. We'll have to talk to Steve when we have him on. We already have Steve scheduled, by the way, so we'll have him on in the beginning of December. And we'll do like a large prospect update. Son of former Flyer Mike Knuble, Cole Knuble went from starting slow last year to being on fire. He did play another game since then, but he did have 10 points in 5 games. He now has 10 points in 6 games, 5 goals, 5 assists, +7 for University of Notre Dame. So really nice improvement there by Cole. Interested to see how he continues to develop. Again, he's a little bit older at the NCAA age. I think he's just turning 20. So he's not the youngest, but if he's dominating at 20, that's a very good sign. That means that he's a good prospect. Doesn't mean he's going to be a scorer at the NHL level, but it does give me hope that he's going to be an NHL caliber player. Santeri Silku, still doing really well. He's got 9 points in 7 games for Mestis, 6 goals, 3 assists in 7 games. Alex Ciernik still putting up points playing against men. He's got 9 points in 11 games, a +5 in the Alvekistan League. Man, I have so much trouble.
Alvenskin, you're
Alveskin. Thank you. I forgot. Heikki Rahonen, he's still doing well. 4 goals, 5 assists, now 9 points in 11 games playing in the U.S. Hockey League. So again, started slowly and then picked it up quite a bit of late. Oliver Bonk, he's got 7 points in 8 games, 1 goal, 6 assists. He's a +5. We'll have to keep an eye on him. I don't know if he's going to put up 20+ goals again next year or this year like he did last year, but we'll see. Again, he's definitely playing a big role for London. Samu Tuamala, mentioned him earlier, 6 points, 6 games, 2 goals, four assists for the Phantoms. That is very nice to see. He's still maybe the most likely to get called up from the forward group. Hopefully the Flyers won't need to call him up this year, but let's be honest, probably will happen at some point. Hopefully he exceeds that productivity. Denver Barkey started off very slow, now picking it up. Again, he started off with mono. He did have 2 assists in 5 games. Now he's got 6 points in 8 games, 1 goal, 5 assists. So starting to pick it up now that he's finally getting back to playing hockey again. Spencer Gill, 6 points in 11 games. He's a +8. So good to see that from the former second-round pick. I'd love to see even more offense from him, but maybe we'll see that as the season goes on. He's also very young, just like Luchenko, young for his age group. Anthony Richard, I guess we can throw in here. He is a point per game at the AHL level. He's doing well. He's been their best offensive player.
It's not surprising the way he played in preseason.
Right.
So.
He also is a potential call-up. Like, absolutely.
I could see it. Yes, speed too, which, I mean, you can't get enough of that at the NHL level right now.
Right,
so.
Yeah. Owen McClellan, playmaker. He's got 5 assists in 5 games. Continuing to do what he's doing at NCAA. I have no idea what's going to happen with him at the end. I'm surprised I assume he's going to get an ELC at the end of this year and come over. But
yeah, we'll see.
I don't know. Rodrigo Abels, 4 points, 6 games. Pretty good start for him. He's been one of their better players for sure. 2 goals, 2 assists. He's kind of their number 1 center, but right now Rhett Gardner's playing that role. The top 2 lines
doesn't make a lot of sense in my opinion.
But the top 2 lines are interchangeable. Yeah. Austin Malloyne, he's got 4 assists in 11 games. Again, he's a long-term project. We'll see how he does. That's the U.S. Hockey League. And then Carter Sutherland, -17 in 12 games.
Oh my God, that is so bad.
Just 4 assists. So he's completely
-17 in 12 games might be like one of the worst stat lines for goals against minus I've seen in a long time. That's very ugly.
He's not having a good year.
No. Anyways, I'll take it from here, Yariv. So after that, we have Matteo Mann, the big defenseman. He's got 3 points in 10 games, 2 goals and 1 assist. Once again, another long-term project, kind of in the same realm as Austin Moline there. Alex Bump has had a pretty good start, 3 points in 4 games. I saw actually this tweet from Steve the other day that was saying that Bump looks like one of the best players on the ice in the game he was watching. So that's not really surprising with what we've kind of seen in his progression going forward.
Yep.
Devin Kaplan, 3 points in 5 games to start off, so not too bad for him. Oscar Eklund, he's got 2 goals in for 2 points in 6 games to begin. Alexis Gendron has only played 1 game and has 2 points in the AHL, which is very strange to me considering, that he's kind of an offensive player, and I don't think they've been the greatest offensively, so it's a little weird.
Drive me nuts.
Yeah, but next up is Ethan Sampson. He's got 2 points in 6 games to begin. J.R. Avon, 2 points in 5 games as well to start off. Elliot Denoyer, 2 points in 5 games. I think everybody would like to see him kind of get back to that offensive output he was, putting up in his rookie season in the AHL. Hopefully something like that can happen. But
I just want to say he's playing on the right wing now.
which is very strange. Yeah. And then after him, we have Ole Shell, who's also had a little bit of a slow start, which is a surprise. 2 points in 6 games, but I think for him, it might just be like he had such a great preseason, was probably fighting so hard to make the team and didn't. It is a little bit of a disappointment, right? To go back to the AHL in that situation. You have Hunter McDonald with 2 points in 6 games. And then from that point, we have Emil Andre. Obviously, he had 1 point in one game with the Phantoms so far. He really hasn't played with them much. Lachenko was mentioned before, 1 point in one game. Zaid Wisdom, 1 point in 4 games. Then after that, we have Noah Powell, who has 0 points in 4 games.
Surprising.
Adam, yeah, very surprising. Adam Yinning, 0 points in 6 games, not as surprising with the role he plays. Helge Graan, 0 points in 6 games.
And Ronnie Adder, 0 points in 5 games.
Yeah, so the defense, not a lot of offense
And all
coming
minuses.
from them. Yeah, not great defensively. Then now we'll go to the goalies. So Carson Bjarnason has really stepped it up in terms of save percentage. Like from the beginning of the season to now through 7 games, like he was starting off at around 850 something.
Yeah.
And has really moved that up there. So he now has a 914 save percentage and a 3.17 goals against average. Itu Makiniemi, a 909 save percentage and a 2.78 goals against, but he's only played 1 game, so not too bad for him as well. Then the goalie really that everybody wants to talk about is Igor Zavragin. So a total of 13 games. He has a 932 save percentage, a 2.22 goals against average, and a 9-3 record in the KHL. What's even more impressive is after his win today for SKA, Zavragin is now 6-0 for SKA with a 922 save percentage, 1 shutout, and a 2.23 goals against average. For a goalie of his age, to start off 6-0 is crazy. Yeah, it's crazy, and he might be one of the best prospects in the world right now just by the way he's playing. So,
and I believe Alex Appleyard said that he is now their starting goaltender.
Well, yeah, if you're going to be 6-0, how could they not start you at that point? They essentially are winning every single game he's in. So it's not surprising to me with those results, right?
So I guess you can really look at the Flyers prospect pool as now that Michkov has graduated, the top 3 guys, and I guess Barkey is just on the outside of that, but it is Zavragin, Luchenko, and Bonk.
Yeah.
With Barkey right there on the outside, and then with 6 picks in this upcoming draft,
they're adding a lot even more.
Is going to be going way up, and right now Kolosov just played in the NHL. He's 22 years old, so it's not too bad. The Flyers prospect
future,
Flyers prospect pool was not bad at all. It still lacks that true number 1 center, but if they continue to go the route they're going, there's a lot available at the top of this draft.
So a lot of picks to parlay too. So
yes, so this is the year to try to grab that. And I wouldn't be opposed to the Flyers being very aggressive in this draft and trying to move up to get one of these elite centers, because we all know that even though I'm very high on Luchenko, we don't know if he's going to turn out to be like a potential 100-point guy to play with Michkov on the power play and, drive offense no matter who he's with. Luchenko is more of a complementary. Like, again, if we look at Bergeron, right? Like, he wasn't a 100-point player in the league. He was an elite 2-way player, right? Sean Couturier, elite 2-way player. That we need that as well. Don't get me wrong, but we could definitely use a replacement for what Claude Giroux used to give us back in the day. We had Giroux and Couturier at one point. We need that again. We really
center depth. Center depth is so important in this league. Look at all the best teams. And look at their center position, and it's usually stacked, right? You have to have at least, at the minimum, 2 very good centers and 1 decent third liner, if not 3 very good centers. And usually that third center could be like a second line center on like another team that's terrible or something, right? So you need center depth to be a good team.
And look, we might not find that guy at the very top of the draft, too. It might come with a different pick. Like Mike Richards was not a high pick, but he was able to play against the best players in the world. And I was just looking at Will Smith. He's a -4. He's got no points. Cutter Gautier's got 3 assists. I think he's like a -5. Like
Yeah, he's
most
been
young
benched.
players are not doing what Michkov or Celebrini, who only has one game, but he does have 2 points in that one game. Like most guys coming in NHL, like the reality is of Michkov is that in any other year that it wouldn't have been Bedard and that there wasn't a Russian war, he's a first overall
He would
pick.
have been a first, yeah, overall,
There,
just based on the
and
skill and what he's done so far.
and
So
Steve and I were talking about this on Twitter. There is nothing about Michkov's reputation that does not say first overall pick. And he even pointed out an article that was written by oh my god, the prospect guy for TSN.
Craig Button.
Not Button, the other one, McKenzie, Bob
Oh,
McKenzie.
there you go. Yeah.
Not the prospect guy, the scouts guy. I don't even know what to call him, but he even pointed out that in his article it was political. It was like, oh, but the question marks around Russia as a nation, and it's like, but that has nothing to do with
With
Michkov.
him as a player, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
good. I'm glad they did that because it ended up with the Flyers getting a first overall pick caliber. And not only that, one that could potentially be generational.
Yeah, he
Because
could
he is
be.
on a generational pace
Yeah,
and he has been his whole career so far.
and he's outscored Bedard at several tournaments, which people fail to mention as well.
Right.
But I think they're going to be like those two are going to be pitted against each other in terms of like a rivalry for the NHL.
Cool.
It's a great marketing.
I like
ploy.
it. I love
Yeah.
Bedard. I would kill to have that guy.
Yeah, he's such a great
Oh my
player.
God. That's what we need. We need somebody
a center like that. Yeah.
even 80% of Bedard. That's the type of center that this team is missing.
Yep.
All right, dude. That was a great episode. We did 2 hours again, of course.
Let's go.
As is tradition. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, but there'll be articles coming out. I have that series happening. So once the Flyers hit their 10th game here, I'm gonna have another one kind of breaking down what they've looked like through the first 10. We're close to it. Not that great, but hopefully into game 15 and 20, they start to turn it around here a bit.
Love it. And keep those up, man. That's awesome. I love that, the idea of that series in general. All right. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the podcast. If you've listened this far and you are not liking the video or subscribing, what are you really doing with your life? Right? Question yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror. Take a
Then subscribe.
hard look into your own eyes and think about why you have not done that so far. Jokes aside, hit the notification bell to get notified. For the audio versions, follow us on iTunes and Spotify and give us a follow and a rating there if you can. That is the best way to support this podcast, all of those things. And also shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia, so make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak. And also shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment need. They help you with your insurance claims. They will help you with all the icky, annoying parts of dealing with insurance companies. So again, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And again, a shout out to SportsBiter, our partners. Make sure to go to them for all of your sports aggregating needs. They have podcasts, videos, articles, all the stuff from around for every sport, but definitely for the Philadelphia Flyers. And our stuff is pinned to the top. Again, the link to them will be in the description of this video and the audio version as well. Again, thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Vasili. You killed it as always. We love you guys. And remember, always stay gritty.